Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Sparkle on Substack with me, Claire Venus, and my puppy, Stella. She's in the room with me today because my husband's super busy. So Stella is just 9 weeks old and is learning about the world. And I am reminding myself that it was definitely a good idea to get a puppy and I can totally handle it. I've got David Speed with me today and I'm so excited to speak to David. So David and I were in the audience at the same event recently. And he asked a really intelligent question that I loved. And then so I reached out and we had a little chat and I had a look at his work. He was brand new to me at that point. So it was really nice for me because I think sometimes we get caught in our echo chamber. And I know because things have got really busy for me online, I haven't had much chance to check out new people's work. So it was a total pleasure meeting David online. And then we decided to do this podcast together so we can learn more about David, his journey with Substack and the work that he does in the world. Welcome, David.
Hi Claire. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. It's nice to meet you in real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love it if you could just explain to people what it is you do in the world and what brought you over to Substack.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm a street artist primarily, which is a whole long story. But I've been painting with a spray can for the last 24 years of my life, and it has become my career, which was never something that I planned for. In fact, when I started making art, I was pretty much told from every direction that it wasn't a valid career option. And I think that's probably why I'm on Substack. It's probably the same reason why I do my podcast is for young me who felt so lost in the world. And I often describe it like I was in a forest and it was really, really cloudy, and you can't see where you're going, and you sort of you come up to a tree and all of a sudden it's right there in front of you because you can't see any further ahead. And that's how the majority of my 20s felt, was that I was trying to navigate the world. But you know how they say that you've got a calling? People say that you don't really know how to listen to the calling. So as I'm lost in the woods, the calling doesn't go right now, turn left. All the calling is kind of this feeling inside you that sort of feels everything that's being presented to me of this normal 9 to 5, and you've got to get a proper job, which those were the words that were said to me by many people, get a proper job. That just felt wrong. And I think my calling was just this sense of, I know I'm meant for something more. I know that I want to have an impact in the world, but I just don't know where I'm going. I'm just completely lost. So my podcast and my writing on Substack is for that 20-year-old me who felt totally lost, just going like, it's okay, dude. Like, you'll be all right. You'll find your way. And maybe I can get you there a bit quicker because it took me a long time. So maybe if I can just share what I've learned on the journey of, I mean, I don't want to sound like, I want to sound humble. I don't want to sound, but like becoming quite a well-known artist. And having some like incredible opportunities and being able to work with some of the most incredible people in the world. Just hoping that I can share everything I've learned on that journey, from literally coming from running down railway lines and painting in abandoned buildings to last month I was working with Nobu and painted their restaurant in Shoreditch, and had a dinner with Nobu-san, and just that entire strange collaboration that came together, coming from someone who was running down railway lines, of just this big journey that I've gone on. And I've learned so much in that time. So I think it's just my effort to try and get it out there and help others that are struggling with that.
That is so, so beautiful. As you were speaking, I was really imagining like someone commissioned to just make a visual of this path that you've been on, this journey, like this foggy forest, and then all of this incredible stuff that has been presented to you and that you've kind of dived into. And I think that with a creative career, we've probably got quite similar trajectories, although we're in very different worlds. There's just something that you cannot put down. Like, I'm from a really small village in the northeast of England. There wasn't anybody that I knew that was doing anything in the arts. Everyone I talked to was like, no, but what do you really want to do? And it's like, no, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be in the arts. I want to work in the entertainment industry. Like, I want to be there, like in the thick of it all. I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'm just going to go for it, just try it all. So my career took me through like film sets and TV, live theatre, touring with a touring theatre group around special needs schools when I was like 21, over to America a couple of times, into South Africa. Like, I've just done so much. And where I've settled now is this hybrid place of creative self-expression, like creativity for well-being. And it has been a calling all the way along. So many times I've been like, if this is the only way to make it happen so that I'm working and my career's in the arts, then that's what I'm going to do, whether that's been project management or fundraising or taking care of artists, artist management stuff. So yeah, that calling is just like, I'm not going to do anything else. This is what I'm doing. And so it was so beautiful to hear you speak about that. And really recently, I was reminiscing with a friend who I met in my job in like a huge producing house theatre, presenting house theatre. And we'd met there, and he wanted to write songs, right? So he had the same thing as me. People were like, but what do you really want to do? You can't, like, you're never going to make it in the songwriting industry. That's too difficult. You know, there's a few kind of near misses with bands and that sort of thing. And he's an incredible songwriter now. He's been commissioned by some of the most incredible people in the industry. I'm not going to name drop, but he's amazing, you know. And we were just reminiscing about our 20-year-old selves and just being like, what would you say to them? Like, what would you say to those two people who were just like, wow, this is hard. Like, what are we doing here? Like, where is our path going to take us? And, you know, we're sat there as like 40-something-year-olds just going, oh, wow, like we've had 20 years of this now. Like, that's been a good run. So yeah, that is very reassuring. And I think we need more messages like that. Even though the internet has opened up so much opportunity, there's still that piece, isn't there, of like, it's okay to follow whatever it is that's whispering. Like, it's okay to follow that and not the societal structure of what's laid out for us and what we might have seen potentially like parents or influencers that are older than us do.
Yeah, I like that you describe it as a whisper, because the overarching is a shout, and it's turning that down and tapping into the whisper, because the whisper is, that's where the gold is, and that's always the harder thing. It's always the thing that you question yourself on, and you're like, I'm not sure about this. This feels difficult and scary, and I can see other people have done it, but not me. Surely not me. I can't do it. It's a. I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago on Substack. There was basically talking about how I believe that so much success in a project comes from your commitment to the project. So if you believe that it's going to be a thing, if I look back on things that I've done that have had success, they were things where we committed 100% of that we're going to make this a success. So the number one example is my podcast, Creative Rebels, which we launched to number one on iTunes on its opening day, and we didn't come into it with a large audience. We didn't have social media following or anything like that, and we didn't manifest it. We didn't just dream that it was going to be a number one podcast. We decided, okay, this is going to be number one. So then I think a lot of people have an idea for a podcast and then they launch it. We didn't do that. We spent 6 months planning how it was going to get to number one. And so that looks like, okay, does the artwork look like a number one podcast? Are the guests booked like A-list guests? And then, okay, we haven't got an audience and we haven't got a podcast that exists yet. How are we going to talk A-list guests into coming onto our show? Sorry, my doorbell's just gone. 1 second.
I'll just let David get that. So because we're recording for YouTube, we just do one take. So we've just got David's lovely dog. Look. Oh, that's so cute. My puppy's wandered off, so she's somewhere. Hopefully everything is okay with that. David will just be getting a package back now.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. So and I'm gonna have to go again in a second when that arrives.
No worries. Carry on.
But yeah, so how do you get A-list guests on your podcast? You have to write really compelling emails to convince people to give you an hour of their time for something that doesn't exist yet. That's a skill in itself. So we sent a lot of emails that we got no reply from, obviously. And the first sort of big name person that we got was Emma Gannon. And then once Emma had agreed to come on the podcast, we caught her on the right day with the right message. she liked the name Creative Rebels. It says a lot in that name. That was how we got Debbie Millman as well. I asked Debbie, because I was sort of like bowing at the feet of Debbie Millman, going, "Thank you so much for doing our podcast." And we interviewed her. We flew to New York and interviewed her over there, and she's such an icon. And I said to her, "Debbie, why did you say yes to doing our podcast?" And she just said, "I just really like the name." 1 second.
I love that. I love that. This is the thing with podcasting, and I've spoken about this a little bit before. When I started Sparkle on Substack and I had zero podcasting experience, I'd done a couple of in-project podcasts, and I just made myself a little list, and I was like, okay, let's go. Like, let's just write to some people and see who wants to come on the podcast. I'm just telling everyone, David, about when I started Sparkle, the podcast, and I just wrote myself a little list of who it would be really nice to speak to and who I thought was doing wonderful creative things on Substack. And literally just worked through the list and was like, okay, this is fine. And honestly, everybody has said yes. So
Yeah.
there's this bit, isn't there, where you're on the outside looking in and you're like, how am I going to do that? Who's going to say yes? And then you have that direct exchange and that conversation with Emma and Debbie, and they're like, just love the name, just love what you guys are about. You know, it was just a human to human connection, because actually that's what we're asking. We're asking, you're a human, I'm a human, should we connect on this topic? Would that be fun? And then some people just see it, don't they? And, you know, they've got time to reply, they've got assistants in place, all that good stuff, and it happens.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a new season coming out in August, and we've got Fatboy Slim is one of our first episodes for that. So
amazing.
it's like, yeah, we've interviewed some of the most incredible people in the world, and so through deciding to make the podcast a success meant lots of research, lots of hard work, like working out how to actually do it. But then it was a success. And then when I think back of projects that I've had where they haven't been successful, it's we were dipping our toes in. It was 1 foot not fully in. And so I posted this article recently about talking about if you have this unwavering commitment to something and going, I'm going to make this a success, whether it takes a decade or like whatever it takes from me, I'm going to do it. And someone emailed me and said, this is just survivorship bias. So I then had to look up what survivorship bias was, because I wasn't sure. And survivorship bias is essentially, because I've been successful in certain projects, then that means that that's coloring my judgment, and that I think everyone can be successful because I was successful in certain things. And I am quite offended by that. And I really sort of had to sit and think with it. And obviously there are myriad different variables that can go wrong or not happen in any project. But I still vehemently believe, and I went back and reread the article, I do so strongly believe, even though I have had success, the successes that I had where I fully committed and completely believed in them, were I was able to see success because of the attitude that I went into those projects with. And the more that I've done now doing projects is easier. I think the thing that happens is it's very difficult to manufacture that confidence of this is going to be a success when you do your first 2 or 3 or 4 projects. So what I try and do is success stacking, which is something that I made up, but basically taking something that's gone well in the past and just building on that, and just saying to yourself, okay, I didn't think I could launch a #1 podcast. It felt a little bit too out there. I didn't think I could get 10,000 Instagram followers, but I wrote that down as a goal. Literally, I had an old dusty Instagram account that I hadn't used for a long time. I had, I think, 200 followers on there. And I wrote down a goal of, I'm going to get to 10K on this in 1 year. And I ended up that year with 40K. And I didn't even think that 10K was possible, but I 4X'd that number. And I just think those projects that I've done where I've had the full commitment of, even if I don't get to 10K followers, it's about the process and learning about social media, and not just going, I posted every day for a year and it didn't work. It's like, no, post and then see what works and tweak and see what's happening generally in the landscape of social media and what's doing well and what other people are successful and learning from them. And so I really don't think it is survivorship bias, but then maybe that's my survivorship bias. I really do think it is, if you fully commit and believe that you're going to make something successful along however long a timeline that you set yourself, if you fully believe in it and you then commit the work into making it a success, I do believe that it's possible.
Wow, I've got so much to dig into on that. Like, I'm mind blown by this conversation already. I don't think it's survivorship bias either. Obviously within the arts, like, we have to check our privilege. We have to all the time. Like, we can't just, come from somewhere and then be like, well, we came from there, so it's not. Like, every year we've got the opportunity to check back in with our privilege and where we are in the arts, and we've got the opportunity to send the lift back down and to share all of the goodness of it all. I feel like what I want to ask you about is your influences, because what happens a lot within the people that I work with on their Substack, so my membership or people that I work with one-to-one, they've somehow got locked in an echo chamber of seeing stuff that is affecting how they feel about themselves, right? So I'm saying really be careful, like, what you read, what you subscribe to, what you are pulling into your ether, not only because the digital landscape is such a lot to digest, and in terms of our human biology, it's still pretty new to us to be digesting that much content and that much information on the daily, but also because if we want to be in creative flow and if we want to be in flow with the higher vision, we're going to have to put a lot of the noise down, right? And so I'd love to know, more about your creative process, more about what you let in to influence, and like what you feel influenced by, what you feel driven by. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I just want to touch quickly on what you said about privilege, because I think it's really important. One of my favorite quotes is the Arthur Ashe quote, which I'll butcher now, but is along the lines of start with what you have, where you are, and do what you can. And I think that's so true. Wherever you are, you just have to use whatever's available to you. To the same degree of people like to get on nepo babies, and it's like, if you've got a chance to get a foot up in a career, like, take it. Like, you don't have to eat tins of tuna if you don't have to, like don't do that. But we all start from somewhere different. And I'm 42 now, and last year I spent a year putting together a solo show, and because I had the luxury and the time to be able to sit and put together a solo show, and I was just sort of thinking about what a privilege it was, and how I would have loved to have made a solo show when I was 20, but I absolutely couldn't have physically afforded to do that. It would have been impossible. And it's quite a shame that it's 20 years later that I'm in that position. And I feel really sorry for all of the young artists that I look at who, I mean, it's the road that I traveled, but they've got this long road ahead of them until they can have a client email them and say, oh, we've got this job coming up for McDonald's, and they can say no because that doesn't align with what they want to do. Like, when you're first starting out, unless you do have some backing behind you or whatever, and you're in a really lucky position, most of us are going to have to say yes to every job that comes through the inbox. And I've been there, and I've worked for clients that I didn't want to do, and I've had to compromise on my own artistic direction because I needed the payday. And now I have huge privilege of I say what's getting painted, and if you don't want it, then I walk. And I've wanted to be in that position for years, and it's taken so long to get there. So there is a huge amount of privilege that I must realize that I'm from. So I always try and talk back, thinking of me when I literally had nothing, and I had to move in with my mum and sell my sneaker collection that I'd bought when I was at uni, and all of the things that I did sacrifice. And I mean, even the fact that I had a uni education, like, even though I learned far more. So when I was at uni, I started tattooing, and I learned far more in the tattoo studio than I did at uni. So I started going to uni less and less, into the tattoo studio more and more. So my real degree came from Evolved Tattoos in Lancaster, but that's another story for another day. But yeah, so in terms of influences, I've been really lucky in having my podcast, because it is, and you'll probably feel the same, every week having a conversation with someone who's been on a journey, it just constantly reaffirms that although every single journey is different, there are certain core pillars of the creative journey that are always present in every single person's story. So I think when it came to building my own career, and I'd had all of these amazing conversations with the best people in the world, I was pretty clear in, I know what works, I know what doesn't work, I know how to adapt and explore and try new ideas and see what's working and get people interested. And I mean, so I've interviewed Seth Godin, and his book This Is Marketing is, I think, the most important book on marketing that there is, the most important tool that anyone could read. But probably it mostly gets read by marketers. And if you are an artist or a creative or a writer or a dancer, and you read This Is Marketing, there's so many, your brain will kick ideas in a totally different way than if you're in the marketing space, and you'll realize how to present your work in a way to make people desire it, and work out what it is that you're giving to the world, and how you can communicate that out to people, which brings in an audience, and then that audience facilitates you living your best life, essentially. So I think my influences are, I managed to, if I phoned Seth Godin or Reggie Yates or Fatboy Slim or Marie Forleo, and I said to them, can I pick your brain for an hour? Well, firstly, I wouldn't even be able to get that call with them to ask them to pick their brain for an hour. However, when you approach them and say, I've got this successful podcast, and we've had the founder of Netflix and the founder of Twitch and all of these different places and iconic people on the show, would you like to be a guest on it? 9 times out of 10, they say yes. And then I get to selfishly, for myself, pick their brain for an hour. And then I get to share it with all of our listeners who get to benefit from that knowledge as well. So, I mean, growing up, I know a lot of people had Michael Jordan posters on their wall and things like that. I really didn't. The only thing that I could, when I think back to my teenage room, the main thing that I think of was this little square of paper that I had written on, and I wrote talk minus action equals 0. And rather than, I couldn't relate to a Michael Jordan, and I wanted help from teachers and family and people. I wanted them to go, this is the way to do it, and no one did. I found it impossible to find. Again, it goes back to why I make the work that I make, is because I didn't have that in the world, and I didn't have anyone that was sort of a hero or a role model or someone that I could sit down and have a one-to-one with who would guide my career. It was simply just, and the only thing I could remember back from my old room was just this scrap of paper, talk minus action equals 0, because so many people say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then it doesn't happen. So I try and talk less, do more. I always found, like, when I was, I would very much say that I'm a street artist now, but when I was younger, I was definitely a graffiti artist. And there's differences between the two. That's a long conversation, but I always realized that, and Rick Rubin talks about this in his most recent book, actually, that there's a time for a certain idea. And so I would have an idea for a wall that me and my buddies would do as it's called a production, where 3 or 4 graffiti writers go down, and you've got a certain background or a color scheme, and something's going on, and the pieces all everyone fits together. There's a kind of a theme to the wall, and coming up with a good theme is always like a challenge. So I would have these certain ideas, and if we didn't do them, we would see that in 6 months' time or 2 weeks' time, someone else had done that idea. And I very much believe that there is a time for, and if you have these ideas but you don't act on them, then someone else probably will.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's so big magic, isn't it? And that's what I found with Sparkle all the way through, and with Substack, because it's instant publishing, right? So for me, I was in these long-term project planning cycles where we were working towards showcases, galleries, events, shows, installations, but there was a timeline that I would set for a funder. We would get the funding, we would make the project happen. And then along the way, obviously, it's like you just collect the sparkles, right? And when you finally mount it, it's like bigger than you ever dreamed of and better than you ever thought it could be. But on Substack, it's like, wait, there's something, I'm going to publish it. So everyone always says to me, you know, what is that publishing schedule like? And it'll be super interesting to lean into your way of doing this. I'm just about to launch a book tomorrow, How to Build a World-Class Substack with Russell Nohelty. And I've done some work with Russell for a little while. He has scheduled posts for like months, like, and these are finished, like incredible, meaty posts, and they're all scheduled. My draft posts, zero. Like, I'm just like working with the energy of the week. So sometimes there'll be like something where I'm like, that's just one line, I'm going to revisit that. But more often than not, I'll be like, okay, what is it that I am pulling on this week? Like, what is it that I want to present? There's a bit more structure in it now because I've got the membership and I give those guys some advance warning. But in terms of leaving space for my own creativity, it's the blank canvas, and then we're waiting to see what the universe wants to kind of command. It's really cool. With you coming to Substack and this kind of long form place, I've checked out your social media. I've had a look. I'm not on TikTok, but I was able to see on Google that you had like a participatory piece where you were leaving screen printed work all over Manchester, London, and there was another city as well. I can't remember now. Was it Bristol?
Liverpool as well.
Liverpool, yeah. Thank you. And I was just like, wow, like 1,000 pieces of art found their way into a city, and then you were like live interacting with that in terms of this magical mystery tour, but also these clues, and then also that mystery of, well, you might find one, you might not, like just get yourself out into the city. I love that. And then on Instagram, obviously I can see a lot of your time-lapse stuff. So, you know, you're talking about 4 hours, 10 hours of working on an artwork, and it's like shrunk down into like just, you know, milliseconds essentially, isn't it? It's like we get such an insight into your process. But coming over to Substack and communicating your sophisticated ideas, your process, what you're doing, has it been quite clear for you to be like, okay, like this is what I want to write to my subscribers about? Or are you still finding your way with that stuff?
Still very much finding my way. I think I always say to artists who struggle with saying I'm an artist, it's a big thing, and I'm always like, just no, you are an artist. And I get sort of quite like, no, just yeah, you're an artist, it's fine, say you're an artist. And then I'm such a hypocrite because I look at myself, and every time I talk to anyone about Substack, the first thing I say is, but I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm not, yeah, I'm on Substack, but I'm not a writer. So I'm still getting into the mental headspace where I can declare that I am a writer. And the sort of I suppose the doubt that I can offer anyone something of value, because you always sort of think, well, what can I say that hasn't been said before? And then I think the more that you reflect on how far you have come in life and what you have learned and the journeys that you've been on, then that's when you sort of think, hang on, yeah, actually, I have come a long way and there is a lot that I can help people with. So I think it's just whenever I have a rough idea of something that could become an article, I will just write it in the notes app on my phone. And then that spark either becomes an article or it doesn't, because sometimes I write 2 paragraphs and go, I haven't fully worked out this in my own head yet. So I'm not in a place where I don't want to confuse people. I want to give them the golden bullet straight away of like, yes, I can implement that into my practice and it's going to help me. So yeah, it's still a journey. I mean, I've only been on there a month and a half, I think. So I've got like 6 or 7 articles up. So yeah, I just but that being said, every article that I've published has been met with a lot of sort of positive feedback, which has been really lovely. So and I suppose that what I'm doing is essentially things that I talk about on Creative Rebels, I'm just putting in written form, and it's another way for people to digest it, I guess. And because we've got such a track record of, I've literally got many DMs of people saying, this podcast has changed my life. To which I always reply and say, no, you changed your life. This was just the catalyst for you to get there. But because I have that proof, I guess, yeah, that means that if there's another way that I can get this information out there, other than me talking on the podcast, then maybe it will be a little bit more, because as you've probably gathered on this podcast, I get lost and I ramble and I'm all over the place. So if I can get my thoughts a little bit more clear and focused and channeled, then maybe even the Substack is a better place to learn than the podcast as well, because it's something that I've really thought about. I think that's the thing that I love about Seth Godin is you ask Seth a question, and what takes me 2 paragraphs to get to, he's nailed in 1 sentence, because he writes every single day and has done for the past 20 years. He knows what he thinks. So I think a lot of Substack for me is by all of the articles that don't make it out, that I don't publish, that's helping me learn what I think. And all the articles that I do publish, I'm pretty confident in. And I'm like, yeah, I think this could help you.
Yeah, that's amazing, David. And I think us as storytellers, when we've had a background in creativity or a background in the arts or a background in culture, there are a lot of stories to tell. There are a lot of stories about process. There are a lot of stories about things that happen. There are a lot of stories about what we distilled and then what we took forward to make this career work. And I think that when we come to Substack, there is still a tiny bit of a hangover, and it's much less now than when I first started in 2022. But there's this hangover of it being a platform for writers, and Substack are very clear, they're very forthright. This is a new engine for culture. It's a mixed media space. Do what you want with it. Like, you guys own it. Like, you do what you want to do. And I am always so excited, really, when I see artists taking up space in new ways and artists really exploring what their voice is, because we just do something in a different way to writers. So when I talk to writers, a year or so ago, and I started to understand that there was a process behind a piece that had a lot of edits, a lot of support, proofreading and time, like some of these pieces, like 3 months to mount, I was like, I'm literally just writing and posting here. Like, I'm in this space of like, I just felt so compelled to share, and I had so much storytelling to do, I guess. Like, I'd found this long form platform and I was like, thank goodness, like social media just didn't connect for me, I think, in the way it was supposed to. And I kept feeling like I was like missing something, but it was like, I just couldn't communicate to the people that I wanted to communicate with there, but I can on Substack. So allowing myself to tell the stories and then to go back and to give myself grace around writing craft has been a real gift. Now I get to the place where, like you, I feel really proud of something that I've written, and I understand more about my individual creative practice and my craft as a writer, because I've had over 2 years now of writing, like at least 1 post a week, sometimes more. So there is something in just showing up to the keys, right? Just showing up and going, yeah, like, okay, like I wouldn't be able to articulate this unless I let it free flow to start with. And then I went back in and edited it, or whatever the process is. Like, I think we're allowed to be individual in terms of how we approach creativity and writing on this platform. It's such a creative platform. We can literally do anything on it. It's such a gift, and not glitchy and not algorithmically driven. It's like, wow, like we get to just have a stage here.
Yeah, I really love that about it. And I mean, one of my most successful articles on Substack is about my disdain for Instagram currently. And I think it's so popular because so many people are upset with Instagram. And I think the reason why is because it felt like our platform for a long time. People were finding innovative ways of using it, and it was shaped by the users. And then all of a sudden it wasn't anymore. And it was 100% shaped by the overlords that ran it. I recently also wrote a very pro TikTok article. And I try not to be emotional about platforms. I try and just suggest what I think would be good for creatives to use. And there are definitely plus. I mean, I built a career on Instagram, but currently it's not really serving me or my mental health. So I'm not posting there nearly as frequently as I used to. but and currently I'm having a love affair with TikTok. I think it's a beautiful place to be, but I'm trying not to get too emotional about it, because at the end of the day, everything that happened on Instagram could and probably will happen in the same way on TikTok. And I'm trying not to get emotional about Substack, but I can't. I can't. I just I did a meetup for artists in my studio recently, and I mentioned Substack so many times that people started laughing when I started saying things like, I don't know if you've heard of this platform called Substack, because I'd said it so many times throughout the day. But yeah, I'm finding it hard not to be emotional about it. I should just go, Substack is a tool for me to communicate my ideas and help creatives to build their career. However, I don't. I go, Substack is a place where I like spending time, where I like learning, where I enjoy scrolling through notes, where I've never been a fan of Twitter. And yeah, I guess it's because currently it feels like we have the power, and it feels like it's a platform built by the people that are there. And if you've been there for a couple of years, and you're probably noticing a lot of newcomers at the moment, and I am one of those newcomers, and I hope we don't change it too much from what you guys are used to and happy with. But currently, I mean, I'm really excited by the platform and what it offers. And I think there's that Kevin Kelly article of 1,000 True Fans, and there's actually someone did I can't remember her name. It's a fantastic article, but there's a lady who's written an article that's basically, you need fewer than 1,000 True Fans these days, because if you've got crazy fans that will buy a lot more from you. But yeah, I just the 1,000 True Fans theory is no more prevalent, like no more obvious to see than it is on Substack. And to anyone who doesn't know that theory, essentially that you need 1,000 true fans in order to survive as a creative, because if you have 1,000 people who are passionate about what you make, and every time you release a print or do a t-shirt or have a show, they will buy tickets and they will attend. Those are your 1,000 true fans, and that's really all you need. And I think you can literally look at your Substack back end and you can go, I have currently got 5 true fans, and then I've got 10 true fans, and you can tangibly calculate, and you can work up to 1,000 true fans. And I mean, someone recently showed me the back end of their Substack, and they had 1,000 paid subscribers, so they're bringing in over 100K a year, and that's just incredible. Like what and it's their side hustle as well, so they have a full-time job alongside this. And wherever before on the internet, I mean, obviously YouTube does pay, but to grow a successful YouTube account to grow a successful Substack takes work as well. But I just see this really beautiful exchange. I talk to a lot of artists and creatives who are scared to ask people to give them any money for anything. And I don't feel like you really have to ask on Substack. It's a much easier process for people to go, you know what, I get a lot of value from what you do, and I'm going to support you. We're in a minuscule way of, I'm basically buying you a coffee every month. But that really adds up. When you've got 1,000, when you've got 100 paid subscribers or 50 paid subscribers, like that makes a huge difference. And so that's why if you're listening to this, you're probably already on Substack, so you've probably already been converted, so I don't need to tell you how great it is, but those are my feelings of why I enjoy it as a platform.
That's super lovely to hear. And I think, yeah, I do get emotional about Substack. I do, because I've worked in a cultural sector under a Tory government that has just been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And, you know, my friends and my colleagues have not survived. They've not been able to keep their career. And this was their soul work, right? This was their Dharma path. So it's just like, but now we have Substack. So I just don't stop talking about it. So I've been commissioned by loads of local authority bodies now, and like governing people, leveling up funds, all this sort of stuff. And I just say yes. I just do all of those commissions to help people to understand what Substack can be, because when we say, oh, get on Substack, people are a bit like, oh, well, what, another thing, like, I don't know what it is, I don't know what I want. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You're going to grow a free mailing list, and from that free mailing list, you get to decide what it is you want to do. Yes, you can offer paid subscriptions if you want, you can host a membership if you want, but you're growing essentially 1,000 true fans. Like, the model works. Like, we can argue it any which way, but I decided in 2017 that was what was missing from my career. I didn't have a mailing list. I set one up on MailChimp. I chipped away at it. When I moved it into Substack, it was 350. It's nearly 10,000 today, and that's in 2 years. So it's mind-blowing what is possible. And yes, it's been a lot of work, but I've enjoyed every second of it, apart from the 5 times I got trolled. But I've enjoyed every second of it. It's been an amazing place to create, and it's been an amazing place to reach a global community, because I think within the Northeast, again, this influence of there isn't enough, there's not enough money, there's not enough funding, like it even started to get almost like competitive and a little bit like just like people sort of undercutting where they never would have done that. They would have always put you forward, you know, they would have said, oh, well, Claire does that, like you want Claire for that specific niche project over there. And it was like, oh no, like my inbox was quiet, right? And I was like, no, like I don't want my inbox to be quiet. Like, I need to be making art in the world. I need to be helping other people to make art in the world. So like, what's the next way that I do that? So yeah, I'm so passionate about it as a platform. I think that when people are looking at what's possible and like listening to people like us talk, I think it's so helpful to be transparent about the timeline, but also know that even from the first post, we have this opportunity to co-create with our audience, to invite them into something that we want to tell a story about or ask them about, and then see where it goes from there to riff off that. So the Instagram piece you mentioned, for example, I've seen a lot of really sophisticated pieces that have gone really well on Substack, because people are like, oh yeah, me too, but I was just a bit embarrassed to talk about it. And we need to, don't we? Because this is how we support each other to understand what we do, what decisions we take. You know, like you say, if we spend less time on there or no time on there, people have like deleted whole Instagram accounts with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers. Like, there's been some really dramatic statements. And I think those statements are, yeah, they're physical and they're in the black and white, but they're also energetic. They're like, no, like, as a creator, as an artist, I get to stand here and create, and people should see that, right? Like, we shouldn't have that hidden. What is that? What even is that? It's bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wild. I think I so obviously everyone's a slave to the algorithm on Instagram, and I got a bit upset a while back that my engagement was down, and I was getting fewer likes on my posts. And then and then someone said to me, you know your piece outside of Shoreditch Station? I was like, yeah. And they were like, do you know how many people walk past that a day? I was like, no, I'm not sure. I was like, and it's in the tens of thousands. So tens of thousands of people see my work every single day in person. For me to get fewer likes on an Instagram post, it really doesn't matter, because am I making art to post it on Instagram, or am I making art for people to see it in the real world, to impact someone on a I mean, I think the biggest, for me, real art is what makes people feel something. So I was having this discussion with someone yesterday, actually, that she said that she finds a lot of galleries and spaces like that very intimidating, because she doesn't know how she's supposed to think or feel about the work. And I said, just for me, the only, it can be a pile of bricks on the floor, but if it makes you feel something, then it's done its job. And so my North Star of my career is to one day have a piece that outlives me, that goes into a museum or a gallery or some sort of permanent collection, that once I'm no longer on the planet, someone will still be looking at my work and feeling something from it. It might happen after my death, and I might never know whether I achieve it or not, but that's what I'm shooting for. And I think that to get bogged down of social media and followers and all of this stuff, that's not the important thing. The important thing is making people feel something, whether that's you've really helped them, or you've made them feel emotional, even if you've made them feel sad. Like that, there is still, sometimes we want to feel sad, and we want to put a song on that makes us feel a certain way. Like making that work and putting it out into the world, I think is the most important thing. And again, we must just remember that social media is a tool, and it's just another way to access people. But for me, really nothing. My work actually can't be viewed properly through a phone screen. So screens don't. Most of my work's in neon pink, and neon is not. You're not able to display it on a phone screen. They don't use the technology that shows those colors. So anything that I do post on the internet is a representation. It's a version of what you would actually experience when you see it in real life. So that's even more of a reason for me to focus on. And I do wonder, I'm not brave enough to do it, but I do wonder what if I could just delete all of my social media, and then the challenge would then be, okay, you still have to impact people. So I would have to go on a rampage around London and paint as many walls as possible to have the same impact because it's very easy for people for you to go viral and for them to see it on their phone. Like, how could I do that if social media wasn't a thing? Like, what would my approach be? It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, and the longevity of human experience in relation to our art, I think. So social media can be like split seconds, can't it? So I could see a piece of your art in my feed, see it, like it, but I haven't experienced it, right? So it's like that bit, isn't it? So what I'm doing is liking something that speaks to me about an experience that I could have. That's what I witness in myself. Like, I've worked with some graffiti artists, I've worked with some street artists, and when we were getting them all ready to come up to Newcastle when I worked on a festival there, it was really exciting, but I had no concept really of what that was going to feel like. There was like 9 arches under a railway bridge that we were painting, and we'd invited some young people to come along and like work with them and assist them and do all that good stuff. And then as the day was progressing, I think it was maybe like 3 days painting or something. And then as that was progressing, just walking up and down that path, I was like, what, wow, like I'm having an experience here, like witnessing live art appearing, and also in these guys interacting with each other and having these lovely conversations, getting people cups of tea, like being part of something. And I'll never ever forget it. I'll never forget the conversations of that weekend. I'll never forget what the final artworks looked like. I'll never forget when someone came like upset and graffitied over one of them. Like, like it was just a wild human experience. And I feel like there's so much that is more possible for us around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you touched on it earlier when I gave away a load of work, and so I really love to do experiences. I think the best art is playful, and that's my favorite kind of art is art that sort of is playful. And so I decided to give away 1,000 pieces of art. So what that looks like is I sketched 4 different designs. I had them screen printed, which cost me £3,000 to get done. And then I hand finished every single piece so that everyone had a unique piece of art. They could say it was a one of one, well, a one of 1,000, but each one was completely unique. And so there were 250 of each of the 4 designs, making 1,000 prints in total. And the hand finishing alone took me 2 weeks. So then when I was about to go and leave all of this work in the street, I decided to, I'm friends with Lucy Werner, read her book, Hype Yourself. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to do a press release around this. So I did a press release. I think Lucy might have helped me on it actually, but did a press release, contacted everywhere, the Metro, BBC, ITV, anyone I could think of, Evening Standard, Time Out. I've contacted everyone and said, I'm going to be giving away 1,000 pieces of work. I'm going to hide them in the streets. There's going to be clues on my social media. You're going to have to go and find these pieces of art, because I thought it was a really cool idea. And none of them were interested in featuring it as a story. So that then made me feel really underconfident, because I've basically been told by the tastemakers that this is not a good idea, because if it was a good idea, we'd feature it. So the night before, I'm thinking, well, I'm just about to go and essentially leave £3,000 in the street. I've spent all this money. I've spent all of this time. I've done this thing, even though they think it's not a good idea. I'm going to go and do it anyway. So no one featured it. I went and left the work in the street, and it turned out to be the best thing I've ever done. And the amount of people that come to my shows that say, or that I meet when I'm out painting in the street, that say, I went on your treasure hunt, and they found one or they didn't find one, and everyone has a story about when. And so many people, I got so many DMs from people saying, thank you for allowing us to be kids again. It was just, there was something, and the kids that I've met as well. So what I love is I met a kid recently, and they had found a piece, and they drew on top of it. And I know you're shocked, but like, I love that, because they weren't given rules. So most a lot of them do end up on eBay, and so people have, and the really annoying thing about it is the rules. When I set it out, I'm like, please only take one, and I sort of reiterate that throughout the day. Like, if we've just done Brixton, you might be walking past a place in Brixton, you'll see 3 or 4 because people haven't found them yet. Please just take one, because then everyone can have fun. But there were certain people who were driving around in cars, getting as many as they could, trying to work out where we were going on the map to intercept it, because they want to put them on eBay, or they want to spoil people's fun, or whatever. You're always going to get some people who try and ruin things. But for the most part, people were getting them, and then they were framing them and looking after them. But a kid gets it, and they want to collaborate. And I just love that. Like, there's no rules. Like, do what you want with it. Turn it into a coaster, put it up on your wall, send it to your grandma, draw on it, remix it. Like, that for me is so fun, and that makes it the experience. It's like, there's the experience of finding it, and then there's the experience of having the piece. So I'm going to be doing an event probably this year that's slightly different, where I'm going to do an art swap. So I think there's something lovely about giving a piece of art to someone. I've really enjoyed that process. So, and I know other artists enjoy it too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a day at my studio where people can turn up with so I think the best way to do it is I'm going to release tickets. So there'll probably be 250 or maybe 500 tickets, depending on how many I think I can do. But I'll release 250 tickets. And once you get a ticket, you're guaranteed a piece of art, as long as you give me something in return. And that can be a sketch on a napkin. It can be an oil painting that you spent 10 weeks on. It can be something that your kids scribbled. It can be literally anything, something you bought from a charity shop, whatever it is that you think you want to swap for my art, and we'll do an art swap. And it's just, I think part of why I've been successful is because I'm trying to work out ways where I can involve people in my process, involve people in a fun experience. My work is about light and dark. It's about shadow and the brightest pigments that I can find juxtaposed against the darkest pigments that I can find. But really, when I break it down, a lot of my work is just about life and about living, and about the fact that we are here for such a short period of time, and making the most of the time that we have, and just doing those ideas and writing that book and publishing that podcast and doing all of the things that you want to do. A lot of my work is just that reminder of, like, do the thing. And if I can get as many people as possible involved in this experience, that's the most sort of fulfilling work that I do, and the thing that I enjoy most. So I'm always going to try and come up with wacky ideas of how I can involve my audience. Like, the people that don't care about my work or don't like Neon Pink, it's not for them. It's for the people that do understand what I'm trying to do with my stuff, and they're into it, and they want to experience something and be part of something. That's who I make the work for.
So beautiful, David. I'm really, really inspired. And I think because I do engagement consultation as well, and this is what I was doing a lot of before Substack took off. So this piece of the world that is about how we deeply engage people and what that looks like. So not just a one-off workshop, like what else, and then the whole kind of piece of art interacting with our everyday, and it being in communities we wouldn't expect. So that was my passion, and something that I burnt out in doing, because you do, it's just a lot. You've got a lot to give. And, the communities that I was working in, like, was hard. You know, it was hard being in those communities. It was beautiful as well, but it was tough. So I feel like circling into this place where we can protect our energy and there's more that we can do, and we can plan that in a way that it works for us. And then obviously it works for our people as well. So on Substack, I'm in this really playful place of going, okay, I've done a couple of writer meetups now. So we did one just the same night that we met at Emma Gannon's podcast event with Farah. We just literally met for dinner, you know, and I am like a fish out of water in London these days because I'm just not there very much. So I'm in rural Northumberland, right? So I feel all of the things, especially as a neurodivergent woman. I'm feeling all of the things. This is amazing. Like the place we went was amazing. The people were amazing. It took me like 2 weeks to process it. I loved it. So I'm trying to invite people in who might be, you know, the introverted writers. I know it's stereotyped, but they might be the quiet creatives who spend a lot of time in their studio. I'm like, how are we interacting with each other outside of the internet ether? So we've got this secret Sparkle book swap thing going at the minute. So I just wrapped up a book here and I put it on Substack chat, and I was like, okay, like this is for someone who wants it. And if you want it, do you also want to do this project? Do you want to wrap up a book and say to your community, I'll send it to somebody. Let's see how long we can get that going for. Let's see what the interactions are. Let's see if we can kind of get things going all over the world. So it just launched a couple of weeks ago, and some people like got it straight away. And for other people, they're like, well, are we swapping books, or do we buy a book? Is it our book? Do we have to written a book? And it's like, there's no rules, guys. Like I've left it loose.
Yeah.
Like you do what you want to do with it. So I feel like there's this really interesting thing, and Substack have set the tone for this, right? Because they were from the off, they were like hosting writer meetups and, you know, curating parties and all sorts of things. They were like, you can get together, like go and do that, you know, go and find ways to talk about what you're doing on Substack. Not even just about Substack as a platform, like the invite is, what are we doing? Like what are we bringing to it? And I just love that.
Yeah, I do too. I think get like the way that people take an idea and having the free reign to do what they want with it. It always surprises me. I paint strangers in the street, so a lot of people will ask me like who the faces are behind that I paint, because I paint a lot of portraits in the street, and I paint strangers. So I did realize that in starting my street art career, you can get a lot of attention, and there's a lot of great artists that have done this, but by painting Amy Winehouse or painting Jimi Hendrix, and those are, because they're relatable to so many people, these are the icons that we've looked up to. Those pieces typically do well, but I didn't really want to celebrate people that have already been celebrated. So I started this project called Be Neon, where there's a form on my website where you can upload an image, and I will paint you in the street. And I don't know anything about the people that I'm painting. I simply know their email address, and then once I've painted the piece, I send them an email and say, here's where you're located. And I thought it would be only people in London, but I've had like worldwide. One guy flew from Seattle, so I sent him the email saying, here's where your piece is located. Go and see it quick, because it's in the street, so you never know how long it could last. And he was in Seattle. He flew over from Seattle. It was on hoardings of a building site. He bought those hoardings from the building site and then shipped those back to his place in Seattle. Absolutely crazy. Turns out he's one of the higher ups at Microsoft. I mean, I had no idea. I'm just looking through photos and going, I'm going to paint this dude. And yeah, now he's like, I'm going to fly you out to Seattle to come and talk to my team. The connections that I've built through just doing this thing of I want to paint strangers, I didn't think of it, but I'm not just going to paint strangers. Some of them I'm going to get to know. There's one lady who's a poet, and she just keeps me up to date with her work. When she publishes a new book, she just sends me, I've got this book coming out. She's like, it's just beautiful stuff like that. And the way that people have used, it's literally just an upload form on my website. But I didn't think that, I thought people would be uploading selfies of themselves, but the amount of people that have uploaded people that they've lost, and I've painted people's like granddads that have passed away and family members, and just, I had no idea when I set it up that people would, I had an idea of how they would use it, and then they've gone, oh, I could do this. And it's exactly the same as what you're talking about with the book thing of some, like, innovation will happen, and someone will go, well, what if I do this? And what if I put my sketchbook in there? And what if I put this novel that I found that's it's got all writing in the margins, and I encourage you to write in your margins, so the next person that you send it to has got. There's just going to be these innovations that happen when you give humans free reign on something, and I just think, yeah, that's really beautiful, and it should be, yeah, we should do more.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. I actually felt really emotional when you were telling me about how that has spiraled, right? That it's a simple invite, right? It's a one. I've seen the form. I was on there today. It's one invite, it's simple, and then people make a curated choice about uploading, a granddad or a friend or themselves or one of their kids. It's really incredible, and then that ends up somewhere in the world. Wow, just amazing. We need to wrap up because we've been chatting for an hour, and I could chat to you for another hour, but I will let you go. I just wondered, David, before we finish, to bring it back to Substack, are you planning on moving your podcast into Substack? Have you got any thoughts about hosting there, or are you just going to leave things as it is and like have those two things separate? Have you not worked it out yet?
Yeah, we've spoken to Farah, who's really sort of been helping us to sort of facilitate it. We've got another meeting with her coming up. So I'm pretty sure that Creative Rebels will be on Substack, but it will also be on Spotify and other platforms as well. So yeah, it will. From what we can see, it's going to be on Substack. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. It's actually been a very simple process for the people that I've supported. It's like a button, right? And then it just exists in Substack, and Substack become the host. And then for me, this one has always existed on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify as well. It was just a seamless RSS that just made it all happen. And this is my first podcast, right? So I'm still learning as I go. So fingers crossed. But also you can just search for David's podcast. I did on Apple, and it was all there. I've listened to the one with Lucy Werner this morning. There's some great stuff on there. Obviously, he's talked about some of the incredible guests that he's had. And you can tell by this conversation, obviously, it's going to be really, really rich material to listen to, really inspiring. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for talking to my audience and helping people to own their creativity, because I think this is what this podcast will do for them.
Yeah, fantastic. That's I think that's what I've been put here to do. So yeah, if it's been in any way helpful, then I'm really glad.
Amazing. And if people are listening and want to just take a note of where they should subscribe to you, so you've got your Substack, what's the name of that? And then, you're hanging out on TikTok there, you're saying like, this is a place that I'm enjoying. So could you give us the handles for those places?
Yeah, interestingly, I put one of my articles up on TikTok. Just took it from Substack, basically screenshot the different pages, and it's had 50,000 views. So this was why I wrote the article about why TikTok is a good place. So everyone assumes that you should be on there doing a silly dance, and that's just not the case anymore. And if you're an introvert and you don't even want to be, I mean, I wasn't present in my article. It was literally just screen grabs of text in a carousel post on TikTok, and it's had 50,000 views. So obviously it's got a good hook, because you have to have a good hook, but that's the same as having a good headline on Substack. You need a good headline for people to actually read it. But yeah, so my TikTok article is available on my Substack, where it's the longest article I've written, I think. But I really sort of break down how to use TikTok as a platform. But yeah, I'm on TikTok and Instagram as @DavidSpeed UK, and my publication on Substack is called Creative Rebellion. My podcast is called Creative Rebels. There's 3 years worth of episodes that you can go back and binge through, but new episodes are coming in August.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, David. It's been beautiful to meet you and your dog, and I will say goodbye and have a gorgeous day.